The Second City, a tale of Chicago's heart and hustle. In the heart of the Midwest, where the winds sweep across Lake Michigan and the skyscrapers cast long shadows over the bustling streets, lies Chicago, a city with a name that carries weight, history, and a touch of defiance: the Second City. The moniker, often tossed around with pride or irony, tells a story of ambition, rivalry, and rebirth. To understand why Chicago is called the Second City, we must journey through its past, its people, and the spirit that has defined it for nearly 2 centuries. It was 1871, and Chicago was a city on fire, literally. The Great Chicago Fire tore through the wooden heart of the city, reducing homes, businesses, and dreams to ash. Over 100,000 people were left homeless, and the city's core was a smoldering ruin. Yet even as the embers glowed, Chicagoans didn't wallow. They rebuilt. Brick by brick, they raised a metropolis from the ashes, one that would rival the greatest cities in the world. This was the first spark of the Second City story. Not second in rank, but second in its incarnation, a city reborn from disaster. But the name Second City wasn't coined in the wake of the fire. To trace its origins, we need to step back to the 1830s, when Chicago was little more than a muddy trading post on the edge of the frontier. New York City, the undisputed king of American urbanity, was the first city, a financial and cultural juggernaut. Chicago, though, was hungry. Its position at the nexus of railroads, canals, and the Great Lakes made it a hub for trade and industry. By the 1850s, it was the fastest-growing city in America, a brash upstart challenging New York's dominance. The rivalry was palpable. New Yorkers, with their cosmopolitan airs, looked down on Chicago's rough-and-tumble ways, its stockyards, its gritty laborers, its unpolished ambition. Chicagoans, in turn, scoffed at New York's elitism. They didn't want to be New York. They wanted to be better. By the late 19th century, Chicago was the nation's railroad capital. Its grain markets set global prices, and its meatpacking industry fed the country. It was a city of muscle and hustle, a place where fortunes were made and lost in the blink of an eye. The term Second City began to take shape in this era, though not in the way we might expect. It wasn't just about being second to New York in population or prestige. It was about perception. Chicago was the underdog, the city that had to fight for respect. New York had Wall Street and Broadway. Chicago had the Board of Trade and the Union Stockyards. New York had refinement. Chicago had grit. To the Eastern elite, Chicago was second tier, a place of industry rather than culture. But Chicagoans embraced the label, turning it into a badge of honor. The real crystallization of the Second City nickname came in 1893, with the World's Columbian Exposition. Chicago had fought tooth and nail to host the fair, beating out New York and other cities. The exposition was a chance to show the world that Chicago wasn't just a slaughterhouse town, it was a cultural force. The White City, as the fairgrounds were called, dazzled millions with its neoclassical architecture, electric lights, and the world's first Ferris wheel. It was a triumph, but it also underscored Chicago's position as the eternal contender. New York still held the crown, and Chicago was forever the challenger, the Second City striving to prove itself. As the 20th century dawned, Chicago's identity as the Second City deepened. It became a hub for innovation and culture, even if it was often overshadowed. The Chicago School of Architecture revolutionized urban design, with pioneers like Louis Sullivan and Daniel Burnham creating the modern skyscraper. The city's literary scene flourished, with writers like Carl Sandburg capturing its raw energy in poems like Chicago, where he called it the city of the big shoulders. Yet, for every achievement, there was a nod to New York's dominance. Chicago was the nation's second-largest city, its second financial center, its second cultural hub. The label stuck, not out of defeat, but out of defiance. By the mid-20th century, the term took on a new life with the founding of the Second City, the legendary comedy troupe, in 1959. The name was a cheeky nod to Chicago's reputation, coined by journalist A.J. Liebling in a New Yorker article that had mocked the city's inferiority complex. The troupe's founders, including Paul Sills and Bernie Solins, leaned into the label, using humor to embrace and subvert it. The Second City became a cultural institution, launching the careers of comedy giants like John Belushi, Tina Fey, and Stephen Colbert. It was a perfect metaphor for Chicago itself, irreverent, talented, and unafraid to poke fun at its own underdog status. But the story of the Second City isn't just about rivalry or rebirth. It's about the people who made Chicago what it is. The city was a magnet for immigrants Irish, German, Polish, Italian, African American, Mexican, and more, who poured in to work in its factories, railroads, and mills. They built communities like Pilsen, Bronzeville, and Little Italy, each adding to the city's mosaic. These were the people who gave Chicago its soul, its resilience, and its refusal to be defined by anyone else's standards. They didn't care if New York looked down on them. They were too busy building a city that worked. The Second City also carries a darker side. Chicago's history is marred by division, racial segregation, labor strife, and political corruption. The Great Migration brought millions of African Americans from the South, seeking opportunity, only to face redlining and systemic inequality. The city's industrial might came at a cost, with polluted air and water, and workers toiling in dangerous conditions. Yet, even in its struggles, Chicago showed its ability to adapt and endure, much like it did after the fire. It was never about being perfect. It was about being relentless. Today, the Second City label is both a relic and a rallying cry. Chicago is no longer the nation's second-largest city. Los Angeles surpassed it decades ago. But the name endures. It's a reminder of a city that has always punched above its weight, that thrives on proving doubters wrong. From the soaring Willis Tower to the vibrant art scene of Wicker Park, from the deep dish pizza joints to the blues clubs of the South Side, Chicago remains a city that refuses to be second to anyone in spirit. In the end, the story of why Chicago is called the Second City is one of defiance, resilience, and reinvention. It's a city that rose from the ashes of a devastating fire, that challenged the supremacy of New York, that turned a slight into a source of pride. It's a city of workers, dreamers, and fighters who built a metropolis that stands tall on the shores of Lake Michigan. The Second City isn't about being second best. It's about being unapologetically Chicago, a city that knows its worth, no matter what anyone else says. As the sun sets over the skyline, painting the glass towers in hues of orange and gold, you can almost hear the city whisper, "Second? Maybe, but never second-rate." And in that whisper lies the heart of Chicago, the Second City, forever striving, forever shining.